Thank you both so much for being here.
Carly, thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Such a pleasure to host you in Miami.
Yeah, I know. It's great. I'm like spending a lot of time here now. I'm becoming a Miami girl, I think.
My favorite thing is actually just hanging out with friends, but on stages, and that's what we're doing here. You know?
I know, that's my dream here. I'm like, two people that I love. I just want to just like talk the state of the market today. Actually, let's just start there. So, and for folks probably know, but Double Down is a Web3 consumer investment fund. Mags, you can probably brag about yourself throughout some of this, or I will encourage you to brag about yourself. It's incredible. You raised this fund last summer, right?
Yes, announced a week before FTX collapsed, and so started low and it keeps getting lower. It's great. But investing in mainstream adoption of Web3, which means that I could have not picked a harder place to invest in right now, but it's all good.
Well, that was going to be one of my early questions. I'm not going to ask it right this moment, but I'm like, is this an awesome time? Because you're like, oh, there's all these deals I'm scooping up, or is this an absolutely horrendous time because we're not ready for mainstream adoption or whatever else? We'll talk about that in a moment. A little teaser for what's about to come in today's content. And then Avery, obviously president of Vayner3, folks know, working with the biggest brands in the world on Web3 adoption, and I think broader, like how do they move into the digital future, would be how I would frame things.
Exactly. Carly got a little preview of how we were reframing Vayner3 about 6 months ago. So Vayner3 is an innovation consultancy helping Fortune 500s navigate the next era of the internet, how they connect with their consumers, whether that's through strategy or sometimes through activation. That is exactly what we do.
Y'all know I think one of the most powerful use cases for NFTs are loyalty programs, which is why I'm so excited about our latest partner, GALXE. That's GALXE. GALXE is a leading platform for building a Web3 community. It is a no-code, plug-and-play solution to create task-based campaigns and loyalty programs. With over 67 million users, GALXE has worked with folks like Optimism, Polygon, Arbitrum, and more than 2,100 other partners with reward-based loyalty programs of their own. And I'm especially excited to announce their latest product offering, GALXE Mint List. Mint List enables NFT projects to issue allow lists based on different user profiles. It's free to use, and projects can then take advantage of GALXE's other offerings, like Task and Quest, which incentivize audience growth and user retention in the long term. Go beyond the mint and keep using GALXE's infrastructure to reward users through on and off-chain actions. GALXE's goal is to help projects grow in an authentic way and help them retain their users and communities over the long haul. And as a user, you can start contributing to your favorite Web3 communities today, joining allow lists through Mint List and earning rewards, NFTs, oats, tokens, and points. Go to galaxy.com right now, that's GALXE.com right now, or click the link in the show notes to get started. Your Web3 community is waiting. I am so excited to announce that this year, Overpriced JPEGs has partnered with OPENSEA, the world's leading NFT marketplace, built for everyone, creators, collectors, noobs, and experts alike. I'm an OpenSea user because they have the best selection of NFTs and a truly inclusive view of the ecosystem, supporting 8 chains and 8 global languages. I trust the systems they've put in place to keep the space safe, like copyright protection, malicious URL detection and removal, robust verification, and more. It's why they are the place to buy, sell, and create NFTs. That's right. You know OpenSea, you use OpenSea, but did you know that OpenSea now has drops? New exclusive projects launch every week from top projects and creators, and you can check them out now using the link in the show notes. They also recently introduced self-serve drops, which is in beta, and allows creators to launch their projects right on OpenSea. This drops product gives creators access to tools like rich storytelling drop pages, multi-chain support, and drop mechanic customization. The full launch for self-serve drops is coming this spring. So check out the upcoming drops on OpenSea right now using the link in the show notes and own what moves you. You'll also be supporting the show in the process.
Okay, so I just want to start with the two of you because I think you have very complementary points of view here. You've got somebody who's coming from the investment side, who's trying to invest in Web3. You've got somebody else who's trying to bring brands into the space, help them navigate through the space. When you look at where we are right now, how would you describe where we are in this point of the cycle? I think part of this question could be, what is your current thesis on Web3? Has that evolved as we've moved through the cycle? Take whatever part of that question that you're interested in. Maybe Avery, I'll just start with you here.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll like adjust a little bit of your language, Carly, because I think at Vayner3, our role is really to help our partners and brands navigate the next era of the internet. A lot of times people will think like, oh, your job is to onboard brands into Web3. And we're like, no, actually our job is to help them build their businesses and connect with their next generation of consumers. And we think Web3 is a great way to do that. We have a very expansive perspective on what Web3 and the next iteration of the internet entails. And to us at Vayner, that it's all driven by consumer preferences, right? Like consumers, like all of us in this room want an internet that is more immersive and personalized and ownable. And the younger generations coming after us want the same thing times 10. And we're seeing that manifest across a host of different technologies, whether it is blockchain-based, which we are tremendous believers in, or it's advanced computing based. And I think we're seeing that manifest through what everyone is now seeing as possible through generative AI. And we're seeing that manifest through what is now possible in this world of immersive experiences in AR and VR. And all these things kind of complement each other instead of contradict each other. So we take this like very expansive view of what Web3 is, and we help our partners figure out if, how, when they should play in this next era of the internet, and determine the right path forward.
I'm going to throw it to you, Max, but one follow-up there. We hear a lot about how damaging, we know, of course, how damaging the FTX situation was for this industry. But myself, like, I'm very in this bubble. You're the one out there interfacing with people who are less in this bubble, who actually have customers out there in the world. Like, how much did like FTX affect y'all's strategy? Was that a pivot moment for Vayner where you're like, oh God, everybody, like these brands don't want to touch this? What was that moment like for you?
It's funny you bring that up because I think that was a big moment, but at the same time, I've been working at Vayner for almost 6 years, and we've seen many things like peak and trough and peak and trough. At the end of the day, like our role is to help our brands navigate those peaks and troughs and ultimately build their businesses. Little known fact, but 5 years ago, we had a conference that was called VoiceCon. We were super hot on the Alexa voice skills. We thought this was going to be transformational. And by the way, I think it still could be, but it wasn't transformational in the way that it seemed like it might be right after Alexa came out. But what we did was work with our partners to understand this technology, develop strategies of how they could embrace it or not, and then ultimately that pivoted into like the next big thing. I think we're huge believers in the promise of what Web3 can bring consumers, which is more transparency, more aligned incentives, less intermediation that happens like in today's digital ecosystem. But at the same time, we're practical that like brands don't drive culture, people drive culture, and we need to be always pivoting and always adapting to where consumer attention is. So I think the FTX moment was like, oh wow, a huge undercutting of consumer trust in the crypto ecosystem, because this was a place where, we're in Miami, it was FTX arena at that point. And it was so established as one of the leaders. Sam SBF was talking in Washington a lot. So I think this undermined consumer trust, was ultimately undermined brand trust in this ecosystem. So of course we had a whole perspective, we had a whole conference call with our partners, and had to really appreciate what was happening and make sure they understood. Now, we're here today, right? Everyone saw the news today of what's happening with Binance and a number of other different tokens. It's funny because there's been so many of those things that have happened over the last several months that we didn't even, no need for a conference call, right? We just kind of proceed.
It's like an email CC. You're like, yeah, by the way, in case you missed it.
FYI, this happened. So I think that there's been a number of sort of like death by a thousand cuts of a lot of these things coming to light. But at the same time, the promise of the technology and the promise of how it can actually improve the internet for billions of consumers still exists, and we still deeply believe in it.
Same question. I'd love to just get your analysis of where we are in this moment of time, and maybe even answering that question I was posing earlier, which is like, which you sort of answered, right? Is this an awesome time to be investing in like consumer Web3 because there's deals and everyone's like desperate for money and there's low valuations, or is it like pulling teeth?
It's both. It depends. So first, I agree with everything that Avery said. That's why we're friends. But at the end of the day, it's consumer centricity is very important to me. It always has been, because you cannot build consumer-facing products if you don't pay attention to what consumers want and need. You cannot figure out what consumers want by asking them. So if you ask them if they want NFTs, like most of them are going to be like, the what? But at the same time, like we know that people want ownership, they want control, they want financial upside, they want security. They want belonging. There's so many things that humans fundamentally want and have always wanted, and this is just a vessel to deliver that in a new and different way. So very much believe in that. To me, like Web3, like where we are right now is you cannot bet against that. You cannot bet against power of ownership. You cannot bet against the fact that we're going to be spending more and more time digitally. You cannot bet against the importance of verification online as a result. At the same time, no one knows when some of those things are going to kind of become truly mainstream and which startups building alongside those themes are going to make it big. And I think that's kind of the kind of fundamental challenge of investing in this space, where I believe in the destination, but I have absolutely no idea how long it will take us to get there. And as a result, I think looking from the investment perspective, the fund's official thesis is mainstream adoption of Web3. I very much believe that the only things that matters for the technology is to get mainstream adoption, because otherwise it doesn't reach its full potential. And I think about a lot of what it will take. Consumer-facing applications are, I think, very important, especially for decentralized technology, because it is built on the premise of power to the people. And then at the same time, a lot of the enablement technology kind of get us there. I do think that a lot of crypto investors have been very hot on infra. But at the end of the day, you can have all the infrastructure in the world. If you don't have applications that people care about, none of the infrastructure is going to matter. And so I think we're we keep talking about onboarding, we keep talking about bad UX, but at the end of the day, you need the use cases. And so I am very much on the hunt for interesting use cases, and I'm of the belief that if it's an amazing product that delivers amazing value to users, it doesn't matter how hard onboarding is, it doesn't matter that it's NFTs or cryptos or whatever, if it delivers beyond what we can build today with traditional Web2 technology, it's going to take the world by storm, and I'm just trying to find founders building that.
Carly, I feel like I should address your question of where we are in the cycle. So there's a very common curve in business school that sort of talks about product adoption and technology adoption, and there's a part of that that's the trough of disillusionment, and I think we're kind of in that right now. Clearly,
raise your hand if you're disillusioned
yeah,
about something.
Clearly,
in
we're
this
all
space.
still illusioned because we're here, but I think that is something that we just need to face the facts on from a realistic perspective of how mainstream consumers are perceiving things like NFTs and crypto in light of some of the mainstream news cycle.
And I think on that point too, I work with founders about this all the time, which is in any other category in the world, when you are marketing, a lot of times you're mostly marketing from neutral. No one knows about your product, and you get to set the narrative of what your product is and what it does and what it means. And in crypto, if you're building in Web3, NFTs, etc., you do not get to start to market from neutral. You either start with people who are so high on it, or people who have negative perception of it. There is very little of neutral, and that is a whole unique marketing and go-to-market challenge that I think a lot of people underappreciate. And so when you have market conditions that are highly volatile, when you're in the bull market, everything is awesome and marketing is very easy. And in a bear market, everything sucks and marketing is really hard. And great builders figure out that it's not about the market conditions, it's about the value that you're providing to the users.
Let me ask to both of you, you brought up the Alexa example, or how voice was going to change everything. And clearly you think maybe something happens with that, but Vayner, I don't know what infrastructure you have to support advising people on Alexa, voice, whatever technology, but it's clearly not as big as what you're doing in the future of the internet, Web3, right? The broad interpretation of that. How do you know when it's the time to be all right, this maybe isn't the future, we're not going to throw a bunch of resources here, versus no, we still believe in this, we're going to double down?
I think it's all about momentum. And to us, it's reading the signals that exist in culture, which are very transparent, which is a good thing. Everybody has access to the App Store. I always look at the App Store and say, what's trending? What's hot? What's in there? Is Blue Sky the new thing? Is there something that's decentralized that's popping up and that people actually care about? If Alexa comes back tomorrow and 100 million people all of a sudden are talking to their Alexa of how, hey, what should I order for dinner, that would actually be something that we would probably lean into. I think it's leveraging all of the data points that exist to understand where consumer behavior is shifting. The reason I think we continue to be so incredibly bullish on Web3 is theoretical, to Mags's points. It's great, all of the theory here makes so much sense. This is everything consumers say they want. And that's, has manifested in a lot of financial outcomes like a year or two ago. And today that's continuing to manifest in terms of how like super fans are engaging online, right? Like they're super bullish on their favorite NFT project. They're sharing about it. They're bringing their friends on board, which continues to be a positive sign for us. I think in things like crypto, we continue to see use cases like remittances grow tremendously. And maybe that's not going to be a massive use case if you are in Manhattan, but if you're in Miami and you pay your cleaning lady in ETH like I do, it's actually a use case I see every single day. So I think it's understanding what's happening from a consumer perspective and then building towards it. Like I see a couple of people from my team here. So when we first started to play around with AI last summer, I saw Midjourney and I was like, oh my God, I run a digital ad agency. Like this is going to save us so much time in mockups. We leaned into it. And then when ChatGPT happened, we were like, oh, like the cat's out of the bag. Everybody's going to care about this. And 100 million people did in a month. So we then doubled down there and continue building our capabilities and our understanding. And then, you know, as things cool off, we need to kind of assess. But it's a constant like balance of not chasing the next shiny object, but understanding what consumers are caring about. And as we see momentum picking up, continuing to develop our capabilities.
We're going to get into all the AI. Just broadly, you mentioned like AR. Obviously, Apple had their big presentation today and unveiled Apple Vision Pro or whatever it's called. But Mags, I want to ask you a tactical question if you're able to answer it. And it's connected to this question of like, when do you double down? That's the name of her fund. That was a pun. Versus not. Like, can you tell your LPs, like, you know what? We're probably not making an investment for the next 6 to 12 months. Or do you like have a time bound which like you have to deploy your capital within some time frame?
Yeah, so for a traditional venture fund, you basically have time frames, usually it's somewhere between 4 to 5 years for investment period, and then like a 10 to 12 years of the total hold period, right? So on the one hand, it feels like 4 or 5 years, long time. On the other hand, it's been 9 months and I haven't made as many investments as I expected. So I think about kind of the pace of investing all the time. One of the concepts for me that I think about a lot is what is the price of failure or like a price of being wrong. And in this context, if I'm wrong and the crypto is going to recover so much quicker and Web3 is going to recover and we're going to be in the next bull cycle and this and that, I can catch up. I can very quickly start investing and like catch the wave. But if I'm wrong and overinvest in the next 6 months and deploy all the capital, and then we are like stuck being in the trough of disillusionment for the next 2 years, like I'm screwed. And so I think about that a lot. Like I'm paying attention to all the signals. I'm paying attention to what people are building in the market. I'm paying attention to great founders, because at the end of the day, great founders build great things and they may end up choosing to pivot, but I would rather back great founders who are doing interesting things. But I am definitely very disciplined and kind of thinking about that concept of like, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm right? And right now it just feels like it's better to go a little slower and kind of be more thoughtful and disciplined about where I'm deploying capital, because I'm not sure when we are going to kind of come out of this perception of the market, people's willingness to engage again, right? If you're building right now, you basically have a very small addressable market, and there are very few net new people coming into the Web3 ecosystem, unless it's for products that have abstracted the Web3 crypto so much that they don't even know that they're onboarding to Web3, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it is not what we talk about when we talk about the full Web3 potential in the space.
You're looking for exciting use cases you mentioned earlier. What are some of the best ones you've seen? What are the ones that make you most excited as of right now?
It's funny because the things that make me most excited as products or applications of the technology actually don't necessarily make for the best investments or the best business models, right? So we talk a lot about ticketing and everything that's wrong with ticketing, but actually, like, I find it really hard to invest in a ticketing startup in Web3, because ticketing is actually not about technology; it's about access to events, and there are all other aspects of it. So it's a great use case. Like, Ticketmaster better figure it out. Godspeed, but like probably not investable. I think about tokenized loyalty a lot, and like in its future, like steady state of full Web3 adoption, tokenized loyalty is going to be like incredible, and will not believe that loyalty runs the way it runs today. But until we get there, it's really hard. And to, Avery's world day in and day out, like brands have other priorities and they're frequently asking like, why does my loyalty program need to be on a blockchain if I have a perfectly nice loyalty program that functions really well, right? And so again, like I've talked to probably 40 loyalty startups in this year alone, and I have a really hard time figuring out why they're going to get critical mass, why brands are going to use them and not someone else who is going to be the winner, and stuff kind of stayed away. So a lot of interesting applications are actually, I don't feel are very investable. Music, another category that people are very excited about because music monetization is very broken. But right now we haven't actually yet figured out a good way to play in Web3 and music. We haven't fully proven that consumers and fans actually care about owning music NFTs. It is still a very small niche. And so I feel like so many of these things are very theoretical right now. I guess the one thing that I am very interested in is actually how we use this progressive decentralization point, where we start with things that are, a little Web 2.5, touching crypto in some way, but very user-friendly, starting to like tease some of the aspects of it, but over time are able to actually fully decentralize for kind of this distributed future.
Last question, and then I want to do a follow-up to you, Mags, and then I want to do Web 2.5 and emerging tech broadly. You had a tweet recently talking about like long-term product market fit and short-term product market fit, and I imagine that's something else that complicates your job to some extent. Although I don't know if you're looking at investing in MetaMask, they're probably far along. But like, and I think MetaMask is an example you gave of like that clearly has short-term product market fit. Does it though have long-term product market fit? Speak a little bit to that.
Well, that's very much TBD. It was a little bit of like a hot takey tweet because
Spicy Mags. Spicy Mags.
Yes, Spicy Mags with Spicy Margs. There are very few things in crypto that even have short-term product market fit. Like there's very few things you can point to like that definitely can just scale, because literally if it did, it would have scaled, and we have very few very scaled things in the market. And then you have even fewer that can have long-term product market fit, aka not going to get disrupted in the next 12, 24 months, but something else coming along. And that's part of the nature of a fast evolving industry where you don't really know what that space is going to look like because there's so much more experimentation and kind of growth and established companies. So that's just part of that. But I would also, in the hot takes genre, I would argue, it's TPD, like does crypto have product market fit? Like there are individual elements of crypto have product market fit, but I don't think we will be talking all the time about what are the use cases if it did. And so it's hard to have product market fit when you're building on top of, so much of the kind of tokenization that itself we fully haven't figured out how to have product market fit there.
Just like drinking. I'm like, I'm glad I have a drink for this.
I have an entire career and fund built on the Web3 promise, and I am questioning the product market fit of the entire thing. Like I am willing to have these conversations because I think part of the challenge that we have in this space is those two camps. Like crypto kind of is like the political spectrum in America, aka it's not a spectrum, right? It's like there's one end and there's the other end. And unfortunately, people are not talking to each other about like the challenges and opportunities. And I think we have to have conversations about what makes sense and what doesn't, and what will take to get there.
Okay, so let's talk about getting there. And I've said this on the podcast before, but I think it's a really interesting conversation to have with the two of you who are so like professionally, constantly tracking the cutting edge. I have a clear story in my head, whether we get to it or not, around like AR and NFTs. And Tom Bill, you talked about this a lot. You've got your AR glasses on, and then because you have a certain NFT, you see a little thing pop up as you're walking down the street, and then it takes you down a little path. And like that sounds very fun. Like all of our East Village experiences now become a little different because I have one set of NFTs, you have a different one. And I see how NFTs and AR, or even VR, but I think AR is more interesting, work very complementary with one another. My story for Web3 and AI is not as clear. I'm curious how y'all feel about this, and maybe let's start with the AI piece. Like, what is the story to you each about that intersection? And then we can take it from there.
So to me, The story around blockchain verification of AI is actually even more clear than it is for AR. Because I think with AR, it's like you could argue like that's Pokemon Go, and like why do you need blockchain for that? I think you will be able to import your assets into different AR experiences, and I think that will be amazing. But hey, if you're talking about a collection that only has 10,000 pieces, is that enough for a game to want to integrate? I don't know. Maybe not. I think that the use case for verification of true information has actually never been more salient. I know there's funny use cases like the Pope and the puffer jacket, right? That over 90% of people thought was real. And there's also really scary use cases like people deepfaking celebrities, deepfaking CEOs and pretending to be them and give instructions to their employees or their followers on things that are actually very detrimental. We saw this happen with, AI generated imagery from in Washington, D.C., right? And that actually impacted the stock market. So I think that there are funny use cases and there are somewhat scary use cases. And in the coming months, I hate to say this, but we will see more scary use cases coming to light. I have seen deepfakes of Gary that I would think was Gary. And that scares me because I'm like, I don't know how. Sometimes I can see like, oh, this is a little gray or this is a little off. That wouldn't exactly happen. But there was a recent New York Times article about a journalist who actually deepfaked herself, and she fooled her bank and she fooled her parents. And that, to me, shows that there is this very deep need for verification of facts and of truth. And I think we'll see that manifest after some of these negative situations really come to light. 'Cause we can all laugh about the Pope and the puffer and like, ha, ha, ha. But like, actually, what about when this turns into something that sparks a very negative news cycle that impacts like millions of people negatively? So I think that that actually is a huge use case. To Max's point earlier, we're still in theory land, and this hasn't actually been proven. But to me, it's very clear that these two things will need to be complementary. In addition to how I think blockchain and NFTs will play with AR. Anyone who might remember Snapchat, I think it was called Treasure, the app. We were messing around with that, and that was amazing for a while. I think it needs to be scaled enough for these companies to want to integrate it. So we'll have to see how that actually materializes. But I see a use case for NFTs and Web3 in AR and also in AI. I think the blockchain verification is going to be something that transcends what we see today. Blockchain has so many use cases, and very few of them are financial speculation. So I'm excited to see some of those use cases come to bear and come to enterprise adoption in the coming years.
I mean, I don't know if I have much else to add, but I will say the digital verification piece is so interesting because I think now people are waking up to the idea that we actually need to have a verification of online content in a way that, for some reason, for the last 30 years, didn't come up, even though there has been so much fake news and this and that. It took the
blue check marks. We had blue check marks to verify individuals.
But it also has never been so good. You always knew it was kind of shitty and the voice was kind of off and it was kind of pixely and now it's not. It looks real.
But also a bunch of people in all over the country were believing things that we're seeing that were not even that good, right? And now it gets to the scary level. But it does highlight this need for actually we should be verifying veracity. We should be verifying the source of the information and the creator and this and that. And by the way, when you have things that are part human, part machine, how do you think about rewarding the human part of it, especially when it was put through 10 different algorithms in between the start and the finish? And so it's finally highlighting that. The thing that I think about then is also, okay, we agree that we need verification. Why does it need to be on a blockchain? And I think that's the part that a lot of the the general consumer, if they understand the need for verification, still don't understand the part why it should be decentralized and not controlled by any one entity. And I think we'll eventually get there. But it is we've made the first jump, we haven't fully made the second jump. And then the second thing I think a lot about as an investor is, okay, we all want verified information, but also for your casual, everyday data consumption, people don't really have willingness to pay for verified information. So what you want and what you're willing to pay is also very different. And so then I think a lot about business models around that. And obviously for some important, there's a clear end of the spectrum where it's a matter of life and death and your financial records and this and that. And you will clearly want to pay for that. But there is this whole swath of information where like you don't want to consume untrue information, but you also don't necessarily want to pay for every piece of information you consume, which is why we've had this whole question of paywalls in media for a long, long time.
You have that, but just to like, push a little bit on that, I think from your favorite creators and your favorite brands, you will pay. Like, look at OnlyFans. Like, that's the whole point of it. You could follow on Instagram.
I'm not sure that's the only point of OnlyFans.
But I think there is like, people will pay to have verified information that's actually coming from their favorite people and their favorite creators that's exclusive. Like we've seen social networks dabbling with this, but it hasn't been like a valuable enough experience because there hasn't been like an actual like deluge of fakes. And that's what we're about to see.
Yes, but I think the part of it is there's this question of like quality versus quantity, right? And so to your point, the people I really care about, absolutely, I'm going to consume from their verified official channels. But like we kind of already do that. It's about the mass market distribution channels where the information just like floods your Twitter and it floods your inbox and floods this and that. And you open your Instagram and you can't really tell if this video that you're seeing is true or not. And then, like, are you going to pay every single time to like double check whether it's true or not? And so like, I'm not saying it's not possible because I 100% think people are going to figure out a way to do it in the like micro payments way to actually make it all work because it will become a problem, right? It will become a far bigger problem than we haven't fully seen yet. But I think about a lot just like what is the business model and not just the need.
I mean, not to mention people do like to be outraged. Like they'll pay for creators often that are extreme. So the question is like, is there a swath of people that like want to believe the deep fake because it enforces whatever thing that they want to believe? And at a certain point don't even care if it's a deep fake. Like it'll be interesting to see as all that plays out. Do y'all know anybody working on the provenance of things combining Web3 and AI? Because I think this is fascinating, and yes, that is the one tether to me between Web3 and AI. But to your point, it feels very theoretical right now, and I would love to talk to somebody who is working on it and can speak to it at a deeper level.
We do have a few vendors who have pitched us. It's all theory, so I will let you know if I see with my own eyes something that is legit.
I will let you know right after I invest in them.
Yeah.
So
Okay, There's a use case that Mags wants to invest in, so everyone out there. Let me introduce you to a brand new company that I could not be more excited about, Web3 Sense. A Web3 analytics platform that combines on-chain data with social media insights to give you the deepest, most meaningful intelligence into any NFT community. I have tested other analytics platforms out there, but Web3 Sense has the most comprehensive capabilities I've seen in the NFT ecosystem. They apply sophisticated data science to wallet histories to determine behavioral patterns and help shape predictive analytics. In other words, they can tell you which Twitter accounts are actually the influencers in your space. And they can tell you what resonates most within a community by looking at what other communities token holders are involved in. The number of use cases here is virtually unlimited. So whether you're a trader, creator, institution, brand, agency, I promise Web3 Sense has data that you want to see with the deep and actionable insights that you need to build, analyze, grow, start, whatever you want to do within the NFT space and in terms of building a business and a community. Now, they are still in very early days, so they're eager to connect with the community. So if you're interested in learning more about what Web3 Sense can do for you and your business, and you should be, go and fill out the very short form linked to in the show notes, and someone from their team will reach out with more information and an opportunity for a product demo. Trust me, you won't regret it. Y'all know I love Ledger, the world leader in critical digital asset security. When you own crypto, what you actually own is a private key that gives you access to your coins. It is imperative that you keep this key safe, and Ledger wallets are the best way to do that. The Nano S Plus and Nano X Ledger wallets, paired with the Ledger Live app, give you the best way to start your crypto journey while maintaining full control over your digital assets. Send and sign your NFT transactions with full transparency in the Ledger Live app. What you see is what you sign. And y'all have heard me talk about Ledger Stacks before. Well, due to unprecedented demand, Ledger has received all the Ledger Stacks pre-orders that it can fulfill through summer 2023. And so they have decided to pause the pre-orders. Ledger is incredibly grateful for the community's support and is working hard to get current pre-orders out and ready to ship so that they can make even more Ledger Stacks to keep your digital assets secure. Sign up for the Ledger Stacks waitlist and be the first to know when Ledger Stacks are available again for pre-orders. But don't leave your digital assets susceptible to breach or hack in the meantime. Order your Nano S Plus or Nano X today by visiting shop.ledger.com or clicking the link in the show notes. I want to talk, again, as we talk about Web3 scaling and obstacles to it, or where do we end up. I was listening to a podcast today, and I was realizing I don't know if I have a crisp definition in my head of what Web 2.5 is. And this person I was listening to today was actually suggesting that Web 2.5 in their mind was like an obstacle to this Web 3 dream because we might get stuck, in his words, in Web 2.5 and never make it to Web 3. And I'm curious, I would love to hear y'all each articulate what you see Web 2.5 is, and if you share a fear that it's actually a negative thing because it's somehow keeping us from a more fully realized vision.
I'm happy to go. I've recently described a startup I was talking to as a Web 2.25, which was not even Web 2.5. I think, as most things in the space, people have a lot of different definitions. To me, fundamentally, Web 2.5 builds on top of Web 2, aka the traditional tech that we know and we are like consumers and participants in, with some elements of crypto, but it's not fully decentralized, right? So whether it's like a collectible POAP, I don't want to use POAP as an example because POAP itself as a company is actually very Web3.
Patricia would be super offended.
I know, exactly. When I said that, I was like, Patricia is going to hate me when he hears that. No, POAP is a very Web3 company. What I mean by that is like if you're doing a Boston Celtics were doing collectibles for everyone who attended a game during the playoffs, right? Like that is like they're not building a Web3 platform all of a sudden, but you have this like collectible on a blockchain that is verifying that you were at this game, right? Like that is. It's going to be permanently on the blockchain, and it's actually not even transferable right now, but like it will be transferable in the future. And we're thinking a lot about. I work with the Celtics on their Web3 strategy. We're thinking a lot about like how do you take it to the next level, and the next level, and next level, and like build on top. But like you're starting with dipping your toes into it. So I think of Web 2.5. You bring some of the aspects of technology, some of the aspects of the behavior, but it is not in a fully decentralized user ownership and user kind of reward for contribution and participation in the same way that we think about the Web3 companies that are kind of building very much in the decentralized spirit. And I am a big believer in progressive decentralization. I think when you try to build like super Web3 native right off the bat, there's a very small pool of users that you can onboard. And so I am a big believer in start with a centralized team, with something that's easier to digest, and then over time decentralize both the kind of the team structures and the building, but also kind of the product and the user power associated with it. But we're just not there yet, quite frankly.
So not a threat, it's a good thing.
I think it's a good thing, but I could also see why a lot of people think it's a threat because users are lazy. Like people are fundamentally lazy. And being fully Web3 requires a lot of work.
I know you guys were like, people fundamentally want control, they want this. I'm like, do we? I don't know.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying.
Do we want centralization, spoon-fed?
Again, it depends, right? On one hand, you have like half the country doesn't even show up for elections, and that is like fundamentally the biggest thing that you want to like have control over theoretically, right? But like you don't feel the impact, and there's a lot of theories why people don't vote, right? But like that's one example. The other example is in most markets in America, it's actually more economical to rent than to own, but people want to own their homes because it gives you control, because it allows you to build wealth or at least control your wealth and like this and that. And so like we have examples kind of from both sides. And I think fundamentally it depends on a little of like how it's executed and like what value you're getting out of having that control or what lack of value you're getting from not having control. And I feel like, elections, people feel like whether they vote or don't vote doesn't matter. And whether you own or don't own home, like actually matters. And I think that's what's going to happen with some of these platforms. But like DAOs, the fundamental problem with DAOs is not tech, it's not onboarding, is that they are dealing with very messy human like nature and emotions and everything.
Like kind of free rider problem, which has existed forever and doesn't get changed because now you have a blockchain.
Human nature has not changed just because we're in Web3. Like that's I always tap back into like what people have always wanted, how people have always behaved. Like we adjust on the margins, we adjust to new technologies. Yes, sometimes we change behaviors, but fundamentally most humans just like behave the same way.
they do behave the same way, but like there are generational shifts that I think can't be ignored. And if you look at Gen Alpha, Gen Z, like the idea of digital ownership is very native to them in a way that it wasn't native to me growing up, right? Like, yes, gamers have skins, but like now we're seeing 75% of Gen Alpha like want to actually spend money on a digital like toy or asset versus a physical one. That's actually a huge shift. And I think that can't be underestimated of this idea of digital first culture, like is now, that's not the anomaly. That is the norm. That is how kids are growing up these days. And they will grow up believing it is normal to own digital items and build digital communities, make digital friends in a way that like, it just has been very different than previous generations, for better or for worse.
But I would argue it's actually not that different because like, why do kids care about owning a certain skin in Fortnite or to owning certain items in Roblox? It's because it's flexing in front of their friends. Like, we've always flexed in front of your friends, especially in high school. Like, that's how you like build your whole presence in the world and try to make sense of who you are and who your friends are, right? Like, it has just shifted to a new realm, but like the fundamental needs of like connection and status and belonging and pride and achievement, like all those things are like very core emotions. They're just playing out in a different environment.
I was voted best dressed in high school, so I'll throw that out there. No, but I think you're bringing up a great point, Mags, is that like fundamentally the epidemic that's affecting our world is actually loneliness. And this, like, we've never been more connected with more Facebook friends and more, communication, but also never more lonely. And I think people are building community digitally. And like, if I had to think about the use case that I'm most bullish on for NFTs, it's actually community building. Like, I've seen people cry of how excited they are to be at a VFriends conference and to actually meet their friends. Like, this has actually changed their lives. And that is a bullish use case of community building digitally, like, is here to stay. And it is a very real thing that I think many of us can appreciate. Okay, so you asked about Web 2.5. So I will say that...
Only if you have thoughts you're excited to share.
Yeah, I will say that, like, I think at Vayner, we probably define our Web3 so broadly, there isn't really a need for a 2.5, but to me, the best, like, definition would be, like, a custodial wallet, which I am very conflicted about personally. We've done plenty of programs that leverage custodial wallets, and that's really the only way to bring on thousands of people who are new to the Web3 ecosystem, so I will say that it's essential. At the same point, are users going to have like dozens of wallets the way they have dozens of apps? I'm not sure about that. And I think you don't really get the full Web3 experience, which I'm sure is what this podcast was talking about, because you kind of are half in, half out, like you're half pregnant. Are you in? Are you out? Like, do you understand Web3? Do you not? Do you even see a benefit of being able to like hold and trade your assets and see those in conjunction with other things that you value? No, you don't, because you're just using some random custodial wallet and probably never getting back into it, which is a thing I think that we're kind of balancing, right? Like the need to bring more people in and create these, and many startups are building in this space to see if these custodial wallets can take off. At the same point, I don't think that's truly a Web3 native solution, which is why we see a lot of the purists kind of, creating tension against this like custodial wallet onboarding.
I want to actually just get to what we were talking about earlier in terms of, you were calling it community building as being this huge use case. And I've said this before too, but I feel like the social signaling piece, what Web3 lacks right now, it feels like more than anything is probably context, right? Is just like these, I've talked about it in the context of fashion items, right? Like a fashion item works as a gaming skin because you're showing it off to your friends. Right now it feels like digital fashions exist in a vacuum, and like, what is the point of a digital fashion item that exists in a vacuum, really? It's interesting if other people want to go look at it and you get to show off the fact that you have it, but that's creating context around it. It's creating community around it. It's giving it like other people are going to look at this thing. It feels like that's really what we're waiting on, is that.
That might come with your AR thesis right there. But yes, I mean, I've been very big on the digital fashion matters because we spend time online, and fashion matters, and therefore digital fashion will matter. But in its current form, I don't believe in digital fashion because there is no places to wear it, and fashion does not exist in a vacuum. It needs context. And so I think from that perspective, it's interesting. I almost feel like the number one use case of like function of digital fashion that we've seen in the last 2 years was the profile picture on Twitter. Like, that served the function of fashion. It was not fashion as we understand it today. It was digital fashion that like you were choosing your identity and signaling something and like choosing very deliberately, this is how I'm going to like present myself to the world. And like it obviously it's very particular use case and only in one digital context. But I like to bring it back to that. People cared because they were flexing. And right now, there's so few spaces that allow you to do that.
Okay, last couple questions, then we'll take ones from the audience. And maybe we can even, no, they're two questions. I was gonna try and make them one, but we're gonna make them two. I guess it's just a question about regulation. Obviously, like we're all worried about it. I'm sure neither of you are gonna say you're not worried about it. I'm curious like how much dialed up the concern is from brands, for example. Like, is it a lot more just brands not wanting to enter because they're unclear what the outcomes are gonna be? For you as an investor, how much does it weigh on you? Obviously, we have like the CZ news out today. Like, the hits just keep on coming. Yeah, give me your thoughts there.
I think it's certainly like not great for, publicly traded companies are naturally have to be risk averse, and they have to stay away from anything that could have like a whiff of negative sort of implications, whether it's financially or in the press. I actually think it's more of a CFO killer than a CMO killer. It's just as like, okay, we're gonna not, get into that space right now until we have more clarity. It's not that we're never gonna do it. It's just we need to stay 100% like above the law. I do want to say, though, that we have seen some companies, Nike's a great example, make major acquisitions and continue to double down into it. And that continues to be a proof point that like major companies can do this. They are doing this. But you have to be that like 1% of brands to continue doubling down into the space when there's a lot of regulatory uncertainty. It also means you need to have a lot of internal and external counsels, giving official guidance and dotting I's and crossing T's and all of that great stuff. So I think it's not a deal breaker. It's just something that is I think where we're seeing is brands not wanting to play in a financialized way. They want to play and participate and learn and listen and understand what consumers want out of this, but way, way, way less like expectation or demand of doing something that's financialized.
It feels like it's an obstacle among a number, which is that consumers aren't demanding this stuff. And so if you have consumers not demanding it and you have regulatory headwinds and you're like, why would I just bother messing with this? Also, can I say I was looking back because the CFTC, is that the right acronym, sued Binance in April. Like, this is now the SEC. There were leaked signal chats from Binance where they're like, somebody with some name that seemed somewhat important literally said, I has, with a Z in all caps, I has no faith in our geofencing. Like, basically, we know US, but I'm like, that is like, that is the funniest and most ridiculous. No, yeah, we're in a... Yeah,
Yes.
we're getting, we're getting around all the geofencing.
Though is like, I think that's so different from what like big brands are
No,
doing in this
100%.
space. And like their objective was never to like, lean into financial speculation.
No, absolutely not. And my last question will be on some financial speculation stuff, but like, I mean, it's just, I don't blame any brands who don't want to get it. They're like, these are children. Like, we're literally being run by a bunch of 25-year-olds. I has no faith in our geofencing. Anyway, okay. Mags, how about you? Like, does this chill I mean, I guess, like, you came into this knowing what you were investing in, knowing that there was regulatory headwinds when you raised this fund. Does feel like the heat has been ratcheted up? And I guess the corollary to this for you is, like, how much are you thinking about geography and thinking, like, let me just go invest in China and like companies being built in freaking Hong Kong or something because I want to get out of the US nightmare?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I would say definitely it's tougher regulatory environment only in that we still don't have regulation, but we have a bunch of lawsuits. And so we still don't have any clarity, but we also have like legal troubles associated with it. It's one of those things where, historically we look to Europe as innovation killer because they have all the regulation and we don't, and therefore America is awesome. For crypto and Web3, it has come to the place where it's easier to build in Europe because there is clarity, because you have these rough guidelines right now, what's considered what and how to build within the system in a way that the US don't, because we still have mostly political infighting about who is going to have jurisdiction over the space. And until that gets cleared out, we cannot make progress into actually figuring out how to set up some guardrails around it, especially from this question of what is security and what isn't. And for me as an investor, that is like one of the most painful things right now, because all of the most interesting use cases I see from a consumer standpoint that give real ownership to users, that allow them to benefit from the financial upside of a product or a creator they're supporting early because that product or creator is blowing up, are financial upside and considered securities, and especially when you're trading them. Like all of the most interesting use cases are the things that SEC would be most upset about. And so it's really hard to kind of figure out how to invest and build in this space in a kind of a safe way. And like, it's examples like that that really drive me crazy, because it is not consumer protection. We could be sharing so much value back with users in a very safe way if only we had guardrails in place for that. As for the international question, I do believe in general that great builders in this space are much more distributed than general tech, and general tech is much more distributed than Silicon Valley would make you believe. But for Web3 and crypto in particular, like it's truly all over the globe, partially because so many of these use cases around financial services are much more important in countries that don't have good financial services the way we do in the United States, although I still use my checkbook, so who knows. But I would say like you have other challenges of investing internationally though. Like there are regulations not around the crypto, but around the investment process. If I wanted to invest in a startup in Germany, I have to physically go to Germany, or have to pay like a ridiculous amount of money for someone to have power of attorney to do things in Germany. You can't just do it digitally, right? And so every country, all new sets of kind of complications and kind of issues associated with that. Also a big believer in competitive advantage, and my competitive advantage is understanding this market and the users here and the builders and having the network, etc. So very much open to global investments, but right now not planning on kind of shifting it meaningfully to outside of the US.
Okay, not to be downer, but my last question is also going to be about another headwind. And this is one that, Mags, you raised in a group chat we're in that I thought was really interesting, which is, to what extent, the question is almost like, is Web3 like rotten to its core, from the standpoint that if this is all about part of this, or part of the premise here is, oh, like you can have stake in these cool brands from their early stages, but a cool brand develops authentically, and does the authenticity get spoiled when financialization gets introduced early, right? So if you're a cool upcoming brand, the second you get just cool enough, people start buying XYZ NFT thing because they think there's financial upside, and now you've ruined the authenticity of the people who are there because they love the vibe, the whatever. Maybe, Avery, do you have thoughts? This was Mag's thing, but I'd love to throw it to you first, and then we'll get Mags in there.
I think creating aligned incentives between a brand and its community is something that's so obvious as a use case, and I think makes so much sense. And financializing it like lightly, I think is okay. It's when it gets like crazy. Like, you know, half of you all here are wearing Nikes, right? Like, how cool would it have been to be a part of that like team, or a part of like rewarded for your participation, rewarded for helping Nike build that brand? I see that as like a very clear use case. I think where it gets crazy is when the speculation is like, okay, that's like 100x what you would have paid for like the sneakers. That's even something that like that company has struggled to balance. So I think a little bit of financialization is okay. That's normal for apparel. That's normal for handbags. That's normal for like coveted items, and people love it. And incentivizing people for helping you build your brand, particularly on social, I think it's a win-win-win for the community member, for the brand, and ultimately for like the financial outcomes of both. So I see that as a big opportunity and thing that has yet to really be cracked. I think almost like the current iteration of the NFT communities got too hot, and now it's cooled off versus like kind of slowly building. And I think of some of the, my favorite brands in the world of Web3, whether it's like a VFriends or a Doodles, and like that's not how they started. Like they started with a community of people who wanted to help build the brands. And yes, there's been some turn and churn, and I think that's natural. But you still have this community of people who are really bought into it and want to help it grow. So I still remain bullish on that use case.
I've been thinking about this a lot. I've been talking about this a lot, which is probably why you're asking. There's clearly a cultural gestation period that needs to happen for something to become relevant and sustainably so, right? If you have something that rises very quickly and it falls down just as quickly, we call those things fads, and they are an interesting thing to think about, but don't actually have meaningful impact in the grand scheme of things. And then so I think about a lot, like how do you build something that matters and for a long time and therefore grows for a long time? When you introduce speculation of the extreme variety, like you will kill that immediately because the community and the audience that you have is composed of speculators, not builders and users. I've kind of arriving right now in my thinking on this in a place where it's possible to combine the two. You just have to be thoughtful about how you do it, right? And so it's one of those, the first step is to realize you have a problem, AKA if you don't think about it, speculators are going to come and like overrun your project. Bobby Hundreds has done it with the Adam Bomb squad where they didn't reveal rarities early on because they didn't want people trading them on rarities. They wanted them to be kind of thinking about the cultural background of each of the items in the collection. Nike is not allowing you to trade their NFTs that they just kind of sold $1 million of for a while because they don't want it to be this like speculative thing right off the bat. And so I think those are like small examples of how you build around timing and think about what it takes to kind of keep the extreme speculation at bay, but also like why does speculation and these like 100x 1000x outcomes happen in the first place is limited supply. And if you don't have limited supply and you're thinking about how you provide something of value that doesn't depend on limited supply, flex factor of I'm one of 100 or 1,000 people who own this thing, then you're able to move past the speculators and think about kind of the longer term cultural value.
It also strikes me that it's limited supply in two senses. Both limited supply, you're talking within the context of one brand. Nike has only 100 that they're going to release of this, but it's also just like macro limited supply. Like there's only so many companies doing NFTs. If this gets baked into the fabric of society to the extent that like most new companies that launching have some level of an NFT thing, does that also sort of levels the playing field a little bit more where now you're buying back in again just because you think the thing is cool as opposed to just latching onto anything because maybe 1,000x's.
Yeah, but also I think like NFTs are just not going to be the product. Like they're the technology, not the product. And so when brands are launching NFTs, like it will not be about, oh, this is an NFT, and it's going to be like about the underlying use case and kind of value being offered, right? So there's also like that element of it. Because the only things that are like pumping like crazy are the things that have people believe will rise in value because people believe there will be value on the other side of it.
But isn't the use case in this context believing in this brand? Like what you're describing is I feel bought into this brand that's an up and coming brand, or like I'm bought into this artist because I'm an up and coming artist. And so that NFT just represents the like, oh, I was here early thing, which if everyone's doing now, you're buying it because you actually do believe in them early, not because there's a chance at 1,000x's.
I feel like it also has a lot to do with the communication. You know, it's like, how are you communicating things like supply? How are you communicating rarity? How are you building your community? Is it in a way that feels very like authentic and very values driven, or does it feel very like greed and speculation driven? Like I'm sure every person in this room has seen examples of both. And I think a lot comes down to how creators and community builders and brands are communicating out what they're building. Are they making it like a hype cycle? You have to be here at this point. There's only this. Or is it something like join us on this journey and anyone who comes during this period can participate?
Yeah, and I think in order to scale beyond 10,000 users, which is nothing in the like real company world, like you have to think through that lens of accessibility and not just thinking through the lens of exclusivity, right? I think a lot about how do you scale exclusivity in a way that allows you to keep the benefits while being able to grow progressively over time in a sustainable way. And I think Doodles are doing a great job thinking through that lens of what it takes to reward your initial community, and those are your super fans, but also to expand the IP, to grow the IP, and to make sure that you can actually grow into a multi-billion-dollar company.
Thank you both so much. Let's do just a couple audience questions. Sorry, I think we maybe ran a little long, of course. We have microphones there. Is anybody first up? Raise your hand. You can either shout it out, use a mic.
What are your thoughts about the digital namespace and brands adopting their own .eth or either importing their .com and using that as kind of a gateway to have all their smart contracts that they're hopefully using and things like that?
Love it. Massively a huge fan of this. We've done this with a couple of our partners, is help them get their ENS domain set up and then ultimately scale that across their contract ownership and the way that they deploy Web3 activations. I think in order for this to really scale and for every brand to like need to do this, we ultimately need more people using ENS and using sort of domain systems than we have right now. And then the other thing that's kind of just like a annoying mosquito challenge is the fact that a lot of like domain squatters are just like sitting on this and sending like really annoying like messages on Twitter to the brands or us. So yeah, I think that's kind of hugely bullish. I think it's amazing, but oftentimes we have to like almost like think through something else. You have to go with the beer.eth versus like the brand's name.eth because domain squatters are sitting on these and hoping to extort brands, which is just like a negative look.
Oh, look, financialization again.
I was like, are we rotten to the core?
But I love it. I love it so much. And I will say it's not only negative. Like there are people who've like actually just voluntarily sent us these, not just for brands, but for celebrities and even for some of our own companies. So there are good people out there. And I think it's a massive use case that as it gains consumer adoption, it's such a smart look for brands to be ahead of it.
It's also not unique. Like Advil, didn't the guy who had Advil on Twitter like extort Advil, the company? You know what I mean?
Someone who had
this
like
existed.
Vader3.com extorted us. So,
yeah,
you know, it
like
happens.
this is not just a blockchain problem. Thank you both so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm sticking around. I don't know what y'all have to do, but we'll be here to chat.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Overpriced JPEGs. If you liked this conversation, if you liked this episode, please go ahead and hit subscribe. It helps me out, it helps the show out, and it means you will get alerts and updates when we post new content. Thanks again.